Sunday, November 10, 1946. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Garden Spot of America. Brooklyn's beloved Greenpoint, affectionately known as the Garden Spot of America, lies between Newtown Creek, formerly Maspeth Creek, and Bushwick Creek, formerly Norman's Kill. It was at one time called Cherry Point, and it covers the territory that long ago was occupied by the farms and lands of the Messerolles, the Bennets, the Colliers, the Griffins, the Provosts, and Captain Peter Praw. Here, in 1645, Dirk Volkerston, also called Dirk the Norman, and after whom Norman's Kill was named, received a grant and later built a stone house near the edge of the East River at the foot of Collier Street. Dirk was a ship carpenter, and it was near his home and little shipyard many years later that the ironclad Monitor was built at the Continental Iron Works. Early settlers established their farms and built their homes along the little creeks and streams that flowed down to the East River. Roads were few and difficult of passage. Water transportation was far more convenient. Because of its location between the two kills, Greenpoint stood apart from the rest of the ancient township of Bushwick. At the time of the Revolution, and for some years thereafter, only 5 Dutch families lived within its confines. First families. Over near the shore of Newtown Creek, on what is now Clay Street, near Franklin Avenue, was the homestead of Jacob Bennett. His father lived on the opposite side of the creek on a farm which he later gave to his son-in-law, a Mr. Hunter, after whom Hunter's Point is named. By inheritance and purchase, Captain Peter Praw from Leyden came into possession of the land originally conveyed to Volkerston. He was a distinguished citizen of his time, commander of the militia and a skilled horseman. In about 1700, he erected a stone house on the edge of the meadows near what is now the northeast corner of Oakland and Freeman Streets. This was later the home of David Provost, and thereafter was owned by James W. Valentine. Between India and Java Streets, on the river bank, was the Abraham Messerole House, built in the early 1700s and occupied during the Revolution by John A. Messerole, a descendant of the original proprietor. John A. was a patriot and was forced to quarter Hessian troops in his home. They made off with practically all his livestock save one cow. The house of Jacobus Collier, or Collier, originally stood near the northeast corner of Collier and West Streets. It was later moved to 224 India Street and remodeled. In the early 1900s, it was occupied by Purser Thomas of the U.S. Navy. Not far from Bushwick Creek, at 1000 Lorimer Street, between Messerole and Norman Avenues, was the Jacob Messerole home, which has been described as a typical Dutch farmhouse. Journey to the Moon. Stiles tells us that Cherry Point was isolated in the olden days because of a lack of facilities for communication with the outside world. The only road was one that began at Abraham Messerole's barn, ran round Robin Hood's barn, and finally ended up at Fulton Ferry, but anyone who traveled it was thankful if he arrived at his destination in safety. As for going to Astoria, it was described as something like taking a trip to the moon, there being no road thither until the erection of the Penny Bridge in 1796. Each farmer, however, had a boat in which he conveyed his produce to the New York market and probably used to get from Greenpoint to Newtown or Brooklyn when he wished to visit friends. The year 1832 is given as the year in which the modern history of Greenpoint began. Neziah Bliss and Dr. Eliphalet Knott bought some 30 acres of the John G. and Peter Messerole farm, and later acquired the Griffin farm. They caused the whole of Greenpoint to be laid out in streets, and in 1838 built a footbridge across Bushwick Creek. The Ravenswood, Greenpoint, and Hallett's Cove Turnpike was incorporated about this time, and a road opened in 1839, running along Franklin Street. This was subsequently extended to Williamsburg, and appears to have been the opening door to the development of Greenpoint. Early builders were John Hillier, who erected a stone house on India Street, and a Mr. Brightson, who built on Java Street. Brightson is credited, too, with having built the residence of Archibald K. Messerol and Poppy Smith's Tavern. According to Stiles, the building of new houses went ahead so rapidly as to defy the most active historian to keep track of their erection. Houses on stilts. Many of the early houses, and particularly those in the old section known as the Orchard, and on Java, Washington, and Franklin Streets, were erected on stilts because they were so near the water. Trade in Greenpoint, Dr. Stiles says, began with a storehouse built for A. K. Messerol, who lived on the north side of Eagle Street, between Franklin and Washington Streets. Washington Street is now West Street. Then came a coal yard, opened at the foot of Freeman Street, which was purchased by Abraham Messerol in 1849, and the business transferred to the corner of Java and Franklin Streets. The establishment of small industrial plants for the manufacture of various articles speedily followed. In 1850, Eckford Webb, founder of one of the best-known schools of naval architecture in America, the Webb Academy at Fordham, started a shipyard afterward known as Webb and Bells at West and Green Streets. Here were built ships that sailed all over the world. The first was a small steamer called the Honda, which was constructed to ply on the Magdalena River in South America. Encouraged by Webb's success, other shipbuilders opened yards in Greenpoint until at length 10 or 12 were in operation, turning out every type of vessel from the smallest skiff to the largest wood and iron steamers. At one time, the Francis Metallic Lifeboat Company had a large plant in Greenpoint, but a change in the federal steamship laws practically eliminated the demand for this type of lifeboat. The 4-cent fare. Up until 1852, the only way to get to Manhattan was in a little skiff, whose owner charged 4 cents per passenger. Then Neziah Bliss, of whom we have spoken above, established a regular ferry service between the foot of Greenpoint Avenue, Brooklyn, and the foot of 10th Street, Manhattan. Soon afterward, this ferry was transferred to Shepherd Knapp. When Greenpoint's first gaslight company was incorporated in 1853, its customers at the outset numbered 26. Greenpoint's first school was opened by a Mrs. Mascarrier, and in 1846 a public school was organized. This, according to Stiles, was the commencement of PS 22, which stood on Java Street, between Manhattan and Franklin Avenues. A Union Sabbath school was established in the fall of 1845, and classes were conducted at a number of different places in the village. At about the same time, or a year or two later, members of the various religious denominations, the Episcopalians, the Methodists, Baptists, the Dutch Reformed, the Universalists, and the Roman Catholics, established church organizations in Greenpoint. The original building of St. Anthony's Roman Catholic Church was built at 150 India Street in the middle 1850s.